Hey everybody, it's Trags, and it's Wednesday, May 1st. Yes, the 5th month of the year is here. Time for episode 296 of Patriots Beat on the CLNS Media Network. Find us at clnsmedia.com. And of course, follow us on Twitter at Patriots CLNS. Patriots wound up taking 10 players in the 2019 player selection meeting in Nashville, also known as the NFL Draft. Here to break it all down for the next half hour or so, if we want to run on a little longer. I don't think anybody's going to kill us for that, is one of the most detailed analysts out there. It was my pleasure to share a Gillette Stadium workroom with him and with Alex Barth. Welcome, CLNS media colleague Evan Lazar once again. You survived Alex for 3 days, huh?
Yeah, it was pretty tough there for a little while. The Patriots took a punter in the 5th round. I almost lost it. Alex thought it was amazing. You know, it was great.
Yeah, if Alex really thinks it was great taking competition to one of the best punters the Patriots have ever had, I got to question that.
No, he was with me on that. We had a great time though. I think we calculated it and we were on a broadcast or on a video for like over 9 hours over the weekend. So
nine hours.
Yeah. So, between the live streams and the videos on the YouTube page, CLNS Media YouTube page, by the way, you can find it all there. It was a whole lot of talk of, draft prospects in football, which I love. So it was great. You know
where else you can find 5 minutes and 36 seconds of it on? IGTV. I even went there and made the boss's boss happy, getting some live Evan Lazar and Alex Barth draft talk up on Instagram TV. You can check it out on the CLNS Media Facebook page. It's linked there, but you can also check it out on my Instagram, Trags1. Go there and check out my IGTV channel, and it is 5.5 minutes of it starts off, by the way, Evan, you talking about the Patriots going off the reservation for a particular pick. Let's just start there. The pick that went off the reservation was?
Yelda Froholt. So it's actually interesting. So Yelda, I obviously did my research after that. I didn't go too deep into guards when I originally did my rankings, just because, thinking that they were pretty set there. And it turns out that, he was one of the better pass protectors in college football last year for Arkansas, who had a pretty tough year. I mean, that Arkansas team, Some years they're good, some years they get really beat up by the competition in the SEC. And Yelda, though, pretty much held his own against all of the really good defensive lines in the SEC. He had a pretty good game against Quinnen Williams in Alabama, where the other 4/5 of the offensive line are caving around him, and he was, staying strong and taking care of his assignment, which is great to see, even in all the trash of everything else that was going on around him, his game never slipped, and he didn't let his game kind of come down to the rest of his teammates at the time, really. So I thought that was great news, but he's a big kid. He's 6'5", 310 pounds, which is, obviously a very tall guard. Usually those big guys are out at tackle. And, he didn't play tackle in college, but he reminds me a little bit, from a scouting perspective of Joe Thuney when Joe Thuney was coming out of college. Same very light feet, bigger guy for a guard, athletic, can move pretty well, and has a nice, strong, sturdy base to him. Good, decent enough core strength, I think. He's not really a people mover in the run game. He's not Shaq Mason. He's not gonna, finish run blocks and really, move people off the line of scrimmage, so to speak. But if you ask him to pull or get to the second level or get out in front of screens or anything like that, he's capable of doing all those things. So I think that this is, short term or even long term, a play to, have a very good reserve interior lineman that can play all three spots, kind of what Ted Karras has given them over the last couple of years. I think there's a good chance that they might think that after this year, Ted Karras' contract is up, he might get a little bit of money in the free agents pool to maybe vie at least for a starting job in a training camp. So they might let him walk and have Yelda as the kind of swing guard, I like to call it, a guy that can play all three spots of the future. And if they don't end up paying Joe Tooney, I think that he has a chance to take over at left guard if they don't move Isaiah Wynn there eventually, down the road as well.
Here's what PFF, Pro Football Focus, said about Froholt. A Danish guard that thrived in pass protection, was a steal for the Patriots at pick 118. What I think is interesting there, Evan, is, and we've said this ad nauseum about the Patriots, they value, right? I mean, and if they feel like they can get a guy at 118 who should have gone in the top 75, they're all over that. And to boot, he is, as you just spent a couple of minutes detailing, a very versatile offensive lineman. And obviously with Dante Scarnecchia still there, and Belichick, still around, the Patriots are always going to place a premium on versatile offensive linemen, and especially seeing as though, the Patriots were pretty lucky last year, but there have been seasons where they have been shorthanded for a game or two or three or four, and they need somebody to go back and forth between positions. Yeah,
I mean, I think the thing is, a lot of people are like, how many offensive linemen do they really need? And the point is, you kind of need a backup at least for every spot, maybe even two, maybe not on the interior, but at tackle you usually carry, 4 tackles and then maybe another one on the practice squad or something like that. And, the key is over the years, I want to use Ted Karras as an example because he's been really good in this role. When someone goes down and, Joe Tooney hasn't missed much games, but David Andrews and Shaq Mason have missed, a game here or there or something like that, or have had to come out mid-game, and they've just kind of put Tooney into that spot, whether it's at center or guard, and they haven't really missed a beat as a result. He's played very, very well in those kind of like spot starts and also, in emergencies when someone gets hurt. That's pretty valuable, for the team, that they can kind of plug and play somebody like that and they're not going to lose, the entire integrity of the offensive line and everything doesn't kind of, fall apart just because one guy gets hurt. So I think that's, a kind of a strength of the Patriots team, and drafting Yodny Kajust and Yelda, I think, was to make sure that strength continues to be a strength.
Yeah, and we'll touch very briefly on this because I know everybody doesn't want 30 minutes of offensive lineman talk.
Why not?
Except offensive linemen listening to this. But Yodny Kajust was one of the key protectors for Will Grier for the last several years at West Virginia. What did you like about him, his size at West Virginia, that made him value at 101? I know he had a torn quad, and that was a big reason why he slipped down into the triple digits.
Yeah, he had a torn quad, and then in 2016 he tore his ACL. So he basically missed like a year and a half of football during his time at West Virginia. So when you almost miss 2 full seasons, obviously you're going to your stock is going to go down a little bit. But he was healthy last year for the most part, I believe. And he is one of those guys, I think, that has a really great combination of athleticism and foot speed and explosiveness out of his stance. When you watch tackles, think that I try to look for is how much depth do they get out of their stance and their what's called their kick slide, their initial kick slide, and that is really key because at the NFL level, these guys that are lined up across for them are really going to get off the ball really quickly and turn the corner really quickly if you let them. So it's a game of angles. I remember talking to Trent Brown about this last year. He just said, simply like, it's really as simple as keeping myself in between Tom and the guy rushing Tom, and it doesn't sound too complex, but it's really, to boil it down to its simplest terms. So when you can get out of your stance as well as a guy like Yodny Kajust can, you can play those angles really well, and you can cut off the angle and force guys to go through you. And then he's pretty good with his hands too, when he does what's called independent hand usage, where he can use both both hands independently, doesn't have to always have one consistent two-handed punch, which is something that the Patriots and Scar likes to do a little bit to, be able to counter and do other things. So if a guy does get into somebody's chest, you can counter it with, a club or something like that. So I think that those are all great things that I see from him. I think on the tape, he's a pretty physical guy. He's got a strong upper body. He can run block too, even though they didn't do, a ton of running at West Virginia in a kind of shootout, run and gun type offense in, an air raid system. But at the same time, I think he can run block a little bit. And I think the biggest thing though that stands out to me, and I said this, over the weekend, was that if you protect, if they trusted you to protect Will Grier in college, guy that went in the third round to Carolina, but was well thought of by a lot of people and was kind of like a franchise quarterback, if you will, for West Virginia, then they must have trusted him a lot to leave him on the blind side like they did. So I think that that's, really great news for the Patriots, and a guy that I think has potential at least to maybe be the starting right tackle, down the road if Marcus Cannon, is getting up there in age. And I hope, I'm saying that because I hope that Isaiah Wynn is going to, kind of take the left tackle job by storm here in the training camp.
Yeah, and that is the working assumption. Speaking with Evan Lazar, CLNS Media, Patriots and NFL expert, and I don't say that lightly. If you just listen to Evan speak and talk on football for 5 minutes, you pretty much know that already. All right, this is the prime topic of conversation and will be, I think, for a good portion of training camp. What about Jarrett Stidham out of Auburn? And I remember when I was in the draft room with you guys, or in the media draft room, I should say, make that clear, that you guys weren't particularly big fans of the Auburn quarterback, but he was a Patriots fourth round selection. And one thing that stuck out to me about what Nick Caserio had to say about him late Saturday night was the fact that he is a very, very bright quarterback, and that the Patriots are going to ask him to do some things differently at the NFL level than he did in college. What does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So at college, and Gus Malzahn's system is a very option-heavy system down there at Auburn. They run a ton of RPO-type elements and other kind of pistol-type stuff where they're running options, not necessarily like old-school triple options, but mostly RPOs. And that really, entails a quarterback most of the time that can run. That is, and Stidham isn't a horrible athlete. He's an average NFL athlete for the quarterback position, but he's certainly not a running quarterback by any means. So when that system, it's called Cliff Kingsbury, the Cardinals coach, who kind of is one of the poster children of these kind of college air raid systems, said that he likes to play 11 on 11 instead of 11 on 10, meaning that the quarterback is one of those 11 players that can make plays with his legs. So Stidham isn't that type of guy, so he's a little bit miscast in, I think, the Auburn offense, and they really didn't alter it much to kind of fit his skill set, which is mostly a pocket passer with maybe a little bit of athleticism to like roll outside of the pocket on like a designed bootleg or a designed action where he's moving to his right, but certainly not a quarterback like, let's say, Kyler Murray, who can just take off and create with his legs.
So we're going to see a lot of him in preseason, and I think and certainly in the I would assume joint practices in the first two weeks of the preseason. Detroit and Tennessee, I believe, are the two preseason road games, and I think there's a good likelihood that we'll have joint practices announced. And I think that is a great time for Stidham to learn what the Patriots expect of him.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with him, the reason why, when they made the pick that I wasn't too gung-ho about it, is because accuracy-wise and ball placement-wise, I do a little bit of charting myself, but I also rely on others, just to confirm what I'm seeing. And he was one of the least accurate quarterbacks down the field in 2018 in this class. And really, in some people's charting, he was even more inaccurate than Tyree Jackson, which is hard to believe.
Let me stop you right there, because you put out a couple of tweets that were, I thought, spot on in terms of detailing his struggles with accuracy, and two of them were sideline outs, where he was under some pressure, but not a ton of pressure, and they were just badly missed on the outside, and those are passes you got to make at the NFL level when the receiver's wide open. I mean, the Auburn receiver was wide open on the sideline, and he missed them bad.
Yeah, it's on drive throws, throws like outs or hitches or anything like that. On deep throws, his accuracy was all over the place. He missed a couple of wide open receivers down the field on deep throws. It's certainly not an issue of arm strength. He's got an NFL arm. And he's really got some nice arm talent in general, and arm talent usually means a good arm down the field, a cannon, but also the ability to throw a touch when it's needed. So he actually has both of those things. He throws a nice ball, and I think that's where the Patriots probably started, other than the mental stuff, was that he has one of the tightest spirals of any of the quarterbacks in this class, and throws a really nice catchable pass. The thing about Stidham, though, with his accuracy, it is all over the place, certainly in 2018, but you mentioned his kind of miscasting in the Auburn offense. And I think that context with him is extremely key with his entire evaluation, and something I asked Nick Caserio about. And afterwards, after they picked him, I said, how much do you take into account what prospects did before last season? So, for example, with Stidham, his 2017 was much, much better than his 2018 at Auburn. He was a much better quarterback, a much more accurate quarterback, much more comfortable in the pocket. This year, he really started to get skittish in the pocket and leave some pockets a little bit too prematurely and not feel comfortable behind his offensive line. He actually even admitted to it when we spoke to him on the conference call. And Caserio basically said that you look at it, what they did most recently is the most relevant, but you look at those past performances as kind of like signs of what potential peak performance could be. What he could potentially be if all the ducks line up in a row and he turns into the guy that he was, actually at Baylor before he transferred to Auburn. And then Auburn in 2017, after his Baylor years, he transferred at Baylor after all of that stuff came down with the program kind of going up in flames, and he transferred from Baylor to Auburn. And after that, 2017, it really fell apart. But from 2016 and 2017, he was considered by a lot of people to be one of the top quarterbacks in this year's class. And then his 2018 was just disastrous. So the Patriots, in my mind, are, I wouldn't say banking on, but I think they're hoping that in the right scheme, with the right coaching, with a good supporting cast, with a good offensive line, they can get 2017 or 2016 Jarrett Stidham out of this pick. And that's a guy that has the potential to start down the road.
Besides, and speaking with Evan Lazar, Patriots and NFL reporter for CLNS Media, follow him on Twitter at EZLazar. That's EZLAZAR. And I want to get to your thoughts on why this is not Danny Etling, beyond just the accuracy. And I know that you have your strong feelings that certainly Stidham has an NFL caliber arm, but what makes him different than the pick of Danny Etling in the 7th round last year?
Yeah, I think that's where you got to start, is that Stidham has some serious arm talent. I wouldn't say that it's an elite arm. It's not as good as, let's say Kyler Murray's, that's why he went number 1 overall. But he has an NFL arm that is better in every way pretty much than what Danny Etling has. Danny Etling reminds me a lot more, and not necessarily playing style wise, but I'm just talking about talent level, as an early Brian Hoyer or Matt Castle. A guy that has enough to be an NFL backup. Maybe a team like those two guys, if he develops down the road, might take a chance on starting him to see what they can get out of him, but I highly doubt it.
Well, the other thing, and I know Bill Belichick noted this towards the end of the playoff run and after the Super Bowl, it kind of leaked out that Danny Etling does a really good job running the scout team.
Yes.
And that value, at least with the Patriots and Belichick and Josh McDaniels, should not be underestimated.
Yeah. So actually, quick story on that. I actually, looked into some of that down at LSU after they drafted him because I had heard that. And he is apparently like an Oscar-winning actor when it comes to running the scout team. And what I mean by that is that he gets everything down. He turns into like a method actor, and he is absolutely turns into the opposing team's quarterback.
That's invaluable. That to me, not to interrupt you, that is just so invaluable. Because Belichick, how many times have we sat there in press conferences and heard him say, well, it's just so hard to replicate speed or replicate the moves that a particular wide receiver or running back does. Well, if you can do that at the quarterback position, that's got to be incredibly invaluable.
Yeah, it's, the cadences, the speaking, he learns the other team's playbook and kind of makes the calls at the line of scrimmage like the quarterback would that they're going to face. And he's also not he's a pretty good athlete for the position. We saw that long run that he had against the Giants in the preseason, and I know that it was wide open for him, but he still ran it, I think over 70 yards for a touchdown on an NFL field. So that's not, so easy to do. And so he has the ability to kind of mock or, and emulate both mobile quarterbacks and pocket passers. So he might not be, a starting caliber quarterback in the league, but as a backup, he's a smart kid that has that ability to run the scout team. It sounds to me a lot like Brian Hoyer, who really got, I think, more credit, or deserved more credit, I should say, for the Patriots' performance in the Super Bowl against the Rams than he got, because I talked to a lot of the defensive players after that game. Devin McCourty, his brother Jason, Kyle Van Noy, they all said that Hoyer did such a great job of mimicking what it is, the communication between Jared Goff and Sean McVay in the headset, and then checking into plays based off of that and getting them ready for that element of it, that it was like they were basically at practice during the game because of how good of a job he did.
Going back to Jarrett Stidham, you want my 10-cent wacky, zany theory on why the Patriots picked him in the fourth round?
Absolutely.
So, to me, he's not a seventh rounder. He's not a clear, scout team quarterback, Brian Hoyer in the waiting. Nor is Jarrett Stidham a first, second round threat to Tom Brady. What I mean by that is, it's kind of clear in the fourth round, with Stidham having the definite need to develop some serious elite NFL quarterbacking skills, or develop some skills that's going to make him an NFL starting quarterback. Tom Brady's not going to feel threatened in the next 2 years, I don't think. Now, Tom Brady wouldn't feel threatened, maybe, period, but you did hear the stories about him and Jimmy Garoppolo and kind of what it turned into in years 2 and 3 with Garoppolo around, and, there started to become this tension, and I don't think there's going to be that tension with Stidham, right?
No, I don't think so. I think that's a good point. The guy that I compared Stidham to, just in terms of, again, talent level, not playing style, was more like a Jacoby Brissett, a player that has some capabilities, has an NFL arm, for sure, has some good football IQ and mental processing on his tape, but in terms of being the successor, a long-term starter, probably not, but he's worth a third or fourth round pick to take the chance and see what you can kind of get out of him and see how far you can get along with him. Obviously, the Patriots kind of gave up on Brissett, but Brissett ended up going to Indianapolis, and then the starts that he had, they didn't win very many games, but he wasn't a complete disaster. And I think that's kind of, where they're going with this is a nice chance on Stidham to see what they can get out of him, and maybe they, hit lightning in the pan like they did with Brady. But at the same time, like you said, it's not a direct threat. This isn't them drafting. If they had drafted Will Grier in the third round, that to me is a direct threat. That's a guy that fits the bill of everything that the Patriots look for, and a lot of ways reminded me a lot of Jimmy. So that I think would have been something that Brady would have noticed. This one, I agree that he's probably not going to notice.
Yeah, so you kind of agree with me that,
Yeah.
I mean, you go out and get, well, let's take an extreme example. If they had moved up and taken Dwayne Haskins, which they could have done. I mean, they had the ammunition to do that. If they had done that, how do you think Tom would have responded to that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that on one hand, he's the ultimate competitor. So on the one hand, he would, I'm sure, just want to kick his butt in practice a whole lot. But on the other hand, I think that he wants to go out on his terms and he wants to be able to kind of decide that. And by drafting a quarterback, in the first round especially, that's certainly pushing the timeline. If you draft a quarterback in the first round, like a Dwayne Haskins, like your example, then that's the next guy. And whether it's a year or 2 years, the clock is officially ticking. And this one does not, start that clock.
All right. Why has Tom Brady not received his contract extension?
So I think that there's some confusion on this one about a potential date in August. Because they reworked his contract last year, by NFL rules, I'm pretty sure you can't rework a contract twice in the same year. So I think that they can still technically sign him to some form of an extension by kind of ripping up this contract and giving him a whole new one. But if they want to tack years onto this contract, I'm pretty sure that they have to wait to August to get that done. So there's that element to it. I also think that there's an element of, we know we're going to get it done, and he's on vacation or training, off with Alex Guerrero somewhere, and, to really get him in the building, sign the deal in the middle of May or April is not really our top priority right now because we know it's going to get done.
Yeah, so there's no real reason for any drama amongst Patriots fans as to why during or before free agency or before the draft the Patriots didn't aggressively pursue knocking down that $27 million cap number.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the interesting thing about, not to get into a whole free agency discussion, but I would say that, I don't want to ever call the Patriots unprepared because that's just foolish because we know that Bill Belichick is one of the best preparation guys in the league. But I think free agency this year hit them pretty fast. They had just won the Super Bowl. I think that this Super Bowl, maybe, the Atlanta one was certainly, obviously, the comeback was just insane. But to kind of, make up for last year against the Eagles, it was an emotional game, I would say, for a lot of reasons. And it kind of snuck up on them, I think, and they had a plan, but the plan was to aggressively go after Adam Humphries, and that thing kind of just didn't work out. And then they lost Trey Flowers, and they lost Trent Brown, and then, they kind of forced Gronk's hand to make Gronk retire. The timeline, I guess, of events is kind of what I'm saying, doesn't exactly match up. I feel like if they had really, demanded a decision from Gronk and wanted to get Brady's extension done to get that cap number done to give themselves some more cap space, those would have been forward thinking kind of Patriot-like moves, and they didn't really do that. So I don't know if it was out of respect for those guys or out of respect for Gronk to give him time to wait or what the case may be, but it did seem like free agency almost kind of snuck up on them this year.
Well, I'm glad, and we're talking with Evan Lazar of CLNS Media. Follow him on Twitter at EZLAZAR. That leads us right into the subject that I want to wrap up on, and we talked about this before we started recording here, and that is the windows of opportunity to roster build in the NFL and why that matters when you're building depth at certain positions. For instance, Jacob Hollister traded to Seattle, and now it appears that the Patriots, it's Austin Seferian-Jenkins and let me bring it up as a matter of fact because I don't want to speak out of turn here. But it's Austin Seferian-Jenkins, Matt Lacoste, Steven Anderson, and Ryan Izzo. Right.
Yeah.
And then the NFL Europe guy, Jacob Johnson. And that's it.
They did sign Andrew Beck as an undrafted free agent that I haven't gotten around to study yet, but there is, as far as undrafted free agents go, there's a little bit of buzz about him.
Okay, very good. Fair enough. But your point about these windows of opportunity to roster build and what Nick Caserio said over the weekend about it.
Yeah, so I refer to it as kind of like in comparison to European soccer where they have these transfer windows where they can make player moves and there's player movement. And in the NFL, I kind of look at it as there's like 4 windows of opportunity to acquire players. And we can start, in the beginning of the league year with free agency, and there's the draft. Then there's a sweet spot for the Patriots in recent memory, and that is right after the 4th preseason game before the start of the regular season. They've made trades in the past for guys like Philip Dorsett, for example, in that little window where roster cutdowns are happening. Teams are kind of making decisions on guys. Maybe they're going to cut them, so maybe you can kind of give up, less to get them, or whatever the case may be. It's just a time where there's a lot of player transactions and player movement. And then there's the deadline, the trade deadline, obviously November 1st. I think it is again this year like it was last year. So those are kind of the 4 windows. They've already gotten past 2 of them, but right before the season and the trade deadline, they didn't do anything at the deadline last year, but those are 2 very prime windows of opportunity to acquire another tight end. Just as an example, I can give 2 names for you. Let's say in Minnesota, Irv Smith Jr., who they just drafted out of Alabama, who I'm sure Patriots fans know all about from, pre-draft preparation. He takes it by storm, and he's the guy that they think he is, and he can be the starting tight end year 1 in Minnesota's offense. Well, then maybe Kyle Rudolph becomes really expendable for them. Maybe they want to wait until they see Irv Smith in a Vikings uniform in training camp to make that call, and then they decide they're comfortable and they move Rudolph. Maybe in Tampa Bay, they decide in an offense by Bruce Arians that's really only 11 personnel most of the time. They really only use 1 tight end, that O.J. Howard or Cameron Brate is expendable. Probably I would lean towards Brate, certainly, given the fact that they drafted O.J. Howard in the 1st round not too long ago. That's a possible trade, target for the Patriots at tight end. But I think the main thing is, for me, is that there's also the option, which I think is probably the most realistic option, of simply just devaluing the tight end position in the offense. And what I mean by that is you adapt to your personnel. You don't have Rob Gronkowski anymore. There isn't another Rob Gronkowski out there. So you draft N'Keal Harry in the 1st round. You still have Julian Edelman. You draft Damian Harris in the 3rd round. So now you have really a loaded backfield, one of the deepest backfields at the NFL with Michelle, James White, Burkhead, and now Damian Harris. So you just allocate those resources that you had with Gronkowski. You kind of share the load among all the other positions, and the tight end position becomes mostly a spot for a blocker, and whatever receiving yards you get from Austin Seferian-Jenkins or Matt Lacoste are kind of a bonus, so to speak, just like a lot of the times the receiving yards that you got from Chris Hogan last year were kind of a bonus. So I think that that's kind of where it's headed. I know a lot of people want to talk about, well, what if Josh Gordon comes back, or what if Demaryius Thomas works out? And obviously those things are possibilities, but I'm Trags. I don't know about you, but I'm not counting on Josh Gordon at all.
Nope. I'm not either. And, it's icing on the cake if they get it. But look, there's too much history there to have an expectation, certainly going into the season, that he's going to be able to be significantly productive for you.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, older Patriots fans and even younger Patriots fans like me that have, been diehard followers of the team for long enough can remember back to the first part of the dynasty when they won 3 out of 4 Super Bowls. Who was the tight end then? Who was the guy that they were throwing?
Well, Christian Fourier for one.
Yeah, but Christian Fourier was not Rob Gronkowski, is my point.
Yeah, correct.
And then Daniel Graham and Ben Watson, those are all nice players, but those guys are not anywhere near on the level of Rob Gronkowski. So at one point in time, this offense did run a lot of the time through the wide receivers and the running backs. And I think that that's kind of where we're headed back to, and you can score touchdowns in a lot of ways.
What are you going to be doing now that the draft is over?
Well, I actually just got off the phone a few hours ago with N'Keal Harry's wide receivers coach at Arizona State. So Coach Fisher and I had a really good conversation about N'Keal, just kind of what the type of person he is, and also the player, obviously, and some of the things, just quickly that stood out to me about some of the things that he said were, for starters, he just talked about how well respected N'Keal is in the Arizona area, because he's a local kid. He went to Chandler High School in Arizona, and he had FBS offers from pretty much every big school in the country. He was one of the most highly recruited receivers in his class at a high school, and he could have gone anywhere. He could have gone to Ohio State, he could have gone to Alabama, Texas, USC, and he decided to stay in his home state of Arizona and play at Arizona State to play for his hometown crowd and play, around his family and all that kind of stuff.
Play to win the game.
And eventually play for Herm Edwards, yeah. And I think that, just listening to Coach Fisher talk about the type of guy that they're getting, he said, he's a very engaging person. He has a big smile on his face all the time, and he's kind of an infectious attitude. And the other thing that he pointed out, just from a makeup standpoint, was the amount of times in the season that Coach Fisher coached him last year that N'Keal Harry stepped up in the biggest moment in big games. When the team really needed a play, he was the guy that was constantly making the plays. And whether it was against USC, he was the example that he used, where he made that one-handed catch that I think everybody has probably seen by now, to kind of put them over the top in that game and kind of clinch the victory for him. So he's kind of a rise to the challenge, type of guy. And but the player comparison that he made, just the final point, was Anquan Boldin. And he said that he knows that Herm Edwards made the comparison to Des Bryant, but that he reminds him more, N'Keal does, of Anquan Boldin because of his ability to play both in the slot and on the perimeter, and his ability to create yards after the catch for a big receiver. And I think that one of the things that a lot of people have talked about as kind of a knock on him is that he's only a 4.52, 4.53 guy, which is not lightning fast. He's not running in the 4.3s or something like that. But Coach Fisher said that, you could test him in the 40, but he plays much faster than he tested in the 40. That he has what he called competitive speed, which is, basically just when the lights are on and he's on the field, he's got the ball in his hands, he's a whole lot faster than he's going to be in spandex at the combine in a 40. So all those things, I think, are probably music to Patriots fans' ears. And I agree, I think that you would agree, Trags, that if they get Anquan Boldin out of this guy, then that's a really good draft pick.
I want to thank everybody for downloading today's podcast, and thank, as always, our great guest, and colleague, of course, Evan Lazar, covering the Patriots for CLNS and tolerating me and Alex Barth throughout the 2019 draft down at Gillette Stadium. It was a blast, I got to tell you. Evan,
it really was.
Anytime I can be the third man in and tape you two having draft discussions for over 5 minutes, count me in, because I'm thrilled. I really enjoyed that.
I'm glad. It was a ton of fun for us. I mean, a lot of hard work obviously went into it. I studied over 200 prospects in this draft and, tried to lock down pretty much everybody that had even a chance to go in the first 2 days. And, with the Patriots having so many picks in those first 2 days. And, it was a lot of fun. And I really think that they had a really good draft. I know a lot of people are probably questioning the cornerback pick and the running back pick with, Juwan Williams and Damon Harris, but those are two guys that I think are going to be instant contributors for this team. So even if you don't think that they need those positions, it just makes the team better when you get good football players. And, iron grinds iron, or whatever that saying is. So,
iron sharpens iron.
Yeah, thank you. So,
you're welcome.
When Damian Harris is competing with Sony Michel and Juwan Williams is competing with J.C. Jackson, that just makes those guys better. and it makes the whole team better. So even if it's not a tight end or it's not another receiver, I think that they did well. And I think some of the guys they got in undrafted free agency too, specifically Jacoby Myers from NC State, who's a receiver, has a chance to probably make the roster as well. Kind of got maybe a second receiver that they liked that maybe had a draftable grade, but it just didn't come to fruition in the draft, in undrafted free agency, which we know they've had success with.
Yeah, I've never heard of an undrafted free agent making the Patriots and making an instant contribution, obviously. Yeah. I'm being sarcastic here. We have gone on almost 40 minutes. Can you believe that, Evan? And you know what?
Yeah, I can, because this is what I do.
I could go on another 40 minutes. I won't, but I could. Give me 30 seconds on what you think of all of these grades, because I'm going to tell you, I think a lot of it's silliness, because you have no idea how these players are going to pan out. Not even the Patriots do, until you get them on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously, I'm not going to do any draft grades. I'm not going to grade the Patriots draft. I'm not going to grade any of their picks. I think the biggest thing is just that, in the moment, you can kind of, make a decision based off of your knowledge of these prospects of, in the moment, was that the right guy at the right pick? Right now, what we know based off of the college game and what all these guys are playing now. Obviously, I think the big one, for example, is Jawan Williams, who the Patriots didn't need another corner, right? And a lot of people that do these draft grades might say Jawan Williams is a good player, but they had other needs, and that was not one of them. And that's all well and good, but the Patriots scouting department fell in love with him. They met with him twice. Bill Belichick met with him in a private meeting himself and actually worked him out privately. And that doesn't happen too often, that Belichick himself is at one of those private workouts,
right,
hands-on, actually working out with the kids. So they fell in love with the player, then almost took him at 32. So if they like him that much, then in this game, you gotta trust your scouts. You gotta trust what your process is, and you gotta trust your eyes, and you gotta go for it. Because if you don't, and you just kind of pick chalk and pick what, the positions of need and the players that you're supposed to pick based on Mel Kiper's big board or something like that's how GMs get fired. So I think that they went with the players, the first 5 or 6 guys, ending with, Yelda Froholt there in the 4th round, that they wanted. Those were their guys, and those were guys that they scouted and believed in. And I think that's all you can ask for, really, because none of us know. They don't know for certain either, but I'm not going to sit here and act like I know more than Bill Belichick and Nick Caserio when it comes to scouting, draft prospects. So their eyes are better than mine, and let's see what happens, I think that that's really the biggest thing. But, making the decision in the moment of, should they have drafted N'Keal Harry or should they have drafted A.J. Brown, I guess you could come to some conclusion based off of what you studied, but no one actually knows.
That's why we have you on, Evan, because you don't know what Bill Belichick and Nick Caserio know.
Yeah, I mean, you can just listen to it. Like, I really enjoyed talking to Nick Caserio, or having him talk to us, really, for the 3 days of the draft after all the picks that they made, because he's, it's different from Belichick, obviously, because he hasn't been around the game for as long as Belichick, but you can still sense some of the Bill in him. Like, you can tell who his mentor was, that kind of thing. And he is a really, astute and really smart football mind and sharp just mind in general, just his IQ must be ridiculous. So I think that that's like, it was really cool to talk to him and hear what he had to say about their process and how they kind of go about all these things.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on, Evan, as always. Obviously, we'll be having you on throughout the off season several more times to talk about what the Patriots are doing in the OTAs. Rookie mini camp is coming up. Then, of course, you'll be following the Patriots during their OTAs, their regular mini camp, training camp, and then the preseason, of course, the regular season. It's just so much to talk about, and I can't wait to do it with you. Evan Lazar, Follow him on Twitter at EZLAZAR. For producer Mike Alonji, the founder of the network, Nick Gelso, this is Mike Petralia, and this has been the Patriots Beat podcast powered by CLNS Media.
Hello, I'm Dan Lothian, host of the Behind the Media podcast on the CLNS Media Network. Along with Jimmy Young, we dive into the biggest media headlines each week with honest, informed, and sometimes irreverent perspectives. It's not all serious. We deliver information and entertainment. As we like to say on Behind the Media, we find the interesting in media so you don't have to go searching for it. Listen to our podcast and get prepped for the next trip to the water cooler. Subscribe to Behind the Media wherever you get your podcast, or find us on www.clnsmedia.com.